Okay, so this evening, what we're talking about is we're going to look at firstly why a business degree matters in 2025 and the next 5, 10, 20 years. And then we're going to zoom in on something called agile business management. And this masterclass will focus on agile business management. Okay, so Ms. Sayuri, if you could just let me know if there's any problems with the sound, if you can't hear me and things like that, or if you can't see the screen, and I'll obviously attend to that. Okay, welcome everyone. The first thing we'd like to do is I'd like to talk to you quickly about agile business management. So what is agile business? Firstly, it's a new way of doing things. It's a new way of business management, of conducting business, which has sprung up in the last 5 to 10 years. It's been gathering momentum. And recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, it's been getting more and more traction out there, the snowball effect. And what's been happening is there's something called agile software development, and this has had a huge impact as business has been working with software developers. They've seen the benefits of working in a more agile and a more robust and dynamic nature. And they've started to implement some of these philosophies, these concepts, and these ideas into the field of business management. Okay, so agile focuses on responsiveness, decision making, and collaboration. Very, very important. Responsiveness meaning that we do have some kind of rough plan or guideline, but we're also open to change and we're willing to adjust our plans as required. We need to be responsive to the market, to customer needs, to changing, to new competitors, to disruptors out there. Think of AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. Think about robotics. Think about Uber and how Uber has disrupted the taxi industry, right? Think about all the new disruptors that are coming out as marketers and managers turn the world of work on its head. Think about COVID-19, which happened in 2020, and how that disrupted the several different industries, like, for example, the tourism and the accommodation industry. Look at new car sales during 2020 and 2021, for example, huge disruption. And then on the other side, think about the work from home, the remote work that people were going through, right? Some of the people are still at the moment in corporates on at least 1 or 2 days a week work from home. And that only started to happen after COVID-19. So what's directing all of this is something called a VUCA environment. VUCA standing for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So what's happening is it's not smooth sailing in business as usual as it used to be. And what's causing this is quite a few different changes. Some of which, for example, are you would see these big, massive electronic boards, right? And it's fantastic in terms of if you're trying to, for example, order quickly, right? You can get your table number, you can order your meals, you can quickly, without talking to anyone, you can even pay, and you take your table number, which is on, as you can see here on the left here, and you go and sit down, and somebody brings your meal to you. So this is fantastic because there's no waiting in queues, because there's quite a few of these little electronic billboards, right? And it's double-sided. So it saves a lot of time, it's very convenient, and life's good, right? The reverse side, the flip side of this obviously is what about employment for cashiers and where is the human touch? Okay, so that's something to think about as well. And then we've got, for example, some of the other things, right? Anyone who's done business management first year would know about pestle and the political being the first factor there. So geopolitical disruptions, United States, South Africa, the relations is, recently in the last year or two hasn't been that great. We know that there's a lot of tension there. The Russia versus Ukraine war, and there's several other wars and faction fighting that's happening around the world, right? So that creates tension, firstly, in the back of people's minds, knowing that there's superpowers at war, right? Or a lot of tension. It also creates disruptions in the supply chain, right? Think about, for example, if something's coming out of Russia or the US, and if there's difficulty getting to access that product or service. Think about, for example, if you're a computer manufacturer and you need one chip or just one small part that's coming out of Russia, and because they're at war, you can't get it. Okay. Another thing that we're obviously focusing on, this has been a major focus in the last 5 to 10 years. We're talking about things like climate change. You would know that, for example, Woolworths in the last few years have stopped the use of plastic bags. You'll find that they use these sort of canvas bags, which are much more sturdy and reusable, which is fantastic for the environment. The reverse side of that is if you put your chicken into those bags, they leak. So guess what? You're going to put each chicken now into a separate plastic packet. So is it defeating the purpose or is it making things better? That's just a question for us to ask. So hence, we're starting to see that as change is coming, it's creating a lot of questions, and some of the solutions that we have could be the right ones, or it could be a start of a learning curve, which will eventually lead us to the right solution. Okay. So obviously, this is where agile is going to start to come in, because we'll see just now how agile will help us to streamline some of the processes we have and work together as a team to achieve a lot of the objectives we have. Now, another big one is, I'm sure everyone would agree with this one, is information overload. Information overload for employees, for customers, just as human beings, there's so much screens everywhere you go, right? You wake up in the morning, you got your cell phone, right? The first thing people do nowadays is they don't even brush their teeth. They first look at their cell phone first, and then they get to the bathroom, right? That's how important the cell phone has become in our lives. So there's way too much screen time. Our cell phone's the first screen we look at, and then on our way to work, maybe if we're driving, we'll watch a little sat nav screen, right? For example, to check the traffic. And when we get to work, we have laptops and personal computers. We're looking at that the whole day for many different reasons. You look up from your desk. If you're in sales or in certain other departments, you could get dashboards right in front of you, seeing your actual versus your target, and whether you're tracking green, red, or orange, right? You also have, when you get home, you've got your TV screen, and then you got your little devices. Maybe people have tablets and things like that. So obviously we know that 20 to 30 years ago, it was a bit different, because in the evenings, the family would get together after supper, huddle around the TV screen, and everyone would just watch one or two family sitcoms or programs, and then it would be bedtime for the kids. Now things have changed, because after supper, everyone's got their little device and everyone's on their little screens watching, whether it's a tablet or cell phone or whatever it is. Each one's watching their own thing or playing games or whatever it is. So you'll see that because there's so much of information overload, everywhere you're looking continuously, we're getting bombarded with marketing messages, with weather, with traffic, with all kinds of information, which creates stress. It creates volatility, it creates uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, the VUCA environment. And then we spoke about COVID-19 and supply chain disruptions. Remember that during COVID-19, bread, for example, something we take for granted, like white bread, was extremely difficult to get during that time. Things like medication, certain people who are on, serious chronic illnesses, for example, like diabetes and high blood pressure and things like that, they needed their medication, but some of the issues were obviously lack of fuel in the petrol stations to get to the destinations, or lack of cash in the ATMs, or simply because the pharmacies in certain areas were closed down because of many different reasons, right? Another thing that we're looking at also is recently in the last 2, 3 years is the effects of remote work, right? So working from home, or working, let's just say you could be at a Durban or Cape Town office or Joburg office, and you could be working in a national position. So you could be working for in different, doing the work of people in different regions. And it's very easy now with MS Teams and so on. It's much easier to do this collaborative effort. And then there's this another socio-cultural shift that we've had, is the new gender identification, which has gained a lot of traction in the last 5 years or so, especially in the United States. There was a huge amount of a push on this in the last 3 to 5 years. Now that Donald Trump has come into power, now you'll see the political thing coming in back in there. His views are very different on this, so he's kind of silenced a lot of the identification and the roles. So what we're finding is we have to be more emotionally sensitive and supportive. Have to gain a lot of empathy, not just as business managers, but as human beings, as employees, as fellow employees, as colleagues, as customers, as friends, family members. We have to have more empathy towards, firstly, the fact that people are under a lot of stress because of the information overload, the pandemics, the supply chain disruptions, the political and economic factors that are happening at the moment, the huge amount of inflation that's going on, and the pinch in the pocket that the average consumer is feeling, right? Petrol being at an average of around 20 to 25 rand a liter, and that pushes everything up because practically everything gets delivered in a truck these days. So then when the diesel and petrol prices go up, then everything goes up. Okay. So where does this leave us? This is an interesting time. So firstly, as a graduate, right, someone who's studying a degree, there's certain key attributes the graduate would want to have, and the university or the college, the business school would want, any tertiary institution would want their graduates to have at the end. Firstly, every graduate needs to have strong critical thinking skills. Super important. And this is tied into creativity and innovation skills, as well as problem solving skills, because once these skills are embedded in the graduate, they can start to positively impact the environment around them, wherever they're working, whether they're an entrepreneur in their own business or whether they're in management or executive positions, they'll be able to strongly contribute and add value. And that business degree will start earning back, right, the value and the rewards that the years of study or that the student has put in. Okay, so it's a double-edged sword because you put in a lot of work and a lot of effort to get there, but at the end, the rewards are very super important also. So let's look at this. The next thing you want a graduate to be is a subject matter expert, an SME, to understand their content well. Obviously, if you're studying, for example, marketing, you've got to understand the marketing space, right? And then a big one, ethical and social responsibility. We want a certain amount of business ethics instilled in the graduate, and a lifelong learning and self-management. This is super important. You want your graduates to continuously love to learn and to learn how to learn better, because in this age of technology, you can't do what was done 50 years ago, where you would join a company and work for 40 plus years and then retire at the end and get a gold Rolex and life's good. And no, it doesn't work like that anymore. Now people, the average employee spends about 5 years at a company, some of them less, and they keep moving and changing roles. So you might find someone getting into marketing, then they move into operations, then into HR, then back into marketing. So people are very flexible these days. So the most important of all these qualities is the last one. That's why it's highlighted in red. It's about being agile. It's about being adaptable, right? Resilient and being responsive to change. When the market changes, we need to change with it, right? When technology is changing and bringing new opportunities and threats, we need to change with that. We need to see the opportunities for what they are, and we need to be aware of the threats so that we can counteract them effectively and efficiently. The other thing is being adaptable means being ready that, yes, we've got a plan, but the plan obviously is subject to change. And we need to quickly realize that when we need to adjust the plan, we need to be quick to adjust the plan and make a new solution. And that's where resilience comes in, because you'll remember all the VUCA factors. They can be overload and stress on the system, but we got to stand up and say, listen, we are resilient, we are strong, and we are stronger than the storm. Okay, so how does all of this now relate to agile business management? So remember, we spoke about being agile, being responsive, resilient, and adaptable. Agile is the newer, the smarter, and the better way of conducting business. It's the way, leading corporate companies, the bleeding edge, the cutting edge of latest technology is working. If you think of all the big names out there in technology, in the petrochemical space, in the energy sector, they're all using agile technology and they're leveraging the benefits of agile. Okay. So whether you actually at management level, director level, or entrepreneurship level, you can always, and your team as well, will benefit from agile. Okay, and then the business degree, how it works is the business degree will enhance the students' understanding of the latest trends, the latest innovations, not just the theory, but the application of all these agile tools, techniques, and technologies, and it's embedded in how we will use this to leverage better business management tools, techniques, methodologies, and technologies. So when you go out there as a student, you are better equipped to understand how work really works in the 21st century. Okay, I'm just going to stop here for a second and see if we have any questions. Okay, seems like we're okay. Okay, if anyone does have any questions so far, you're welcome to ask, and Ms. Sayuri will assist with that. So what is Agile all about? Let's get into it. So the traditional way of working used to be very hierarchical, and it was very rigid, strong planning, slow decision making. If you think a factory environment in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, there would be set procedures, what we call SOPs, standard operating procedures. There would be a process or a procedure for every single activity that you could think of, and it would be documented. Everyone would learn it and they'd use it, and that was it. It was simple. Now that the world has changed so much, as you will see, there's many disruptors out there. So hence, what we're having nowadays is we have something called agile, which is much flatter. It's iterative, meaning repetitive in certain ways, and adaptive and fast paced. So I'm just going to stop here and explain what this means, right? So flat, iterative, and adaptive. So someone may be thinking, what does this mean? Agile means that if you are designing a, let's just say something simple like a interface for an ATM, for example, right? So what you would do is you would first get a team of people, the IT people, the marketing people, the operations people, that all the major players that were involved or supposed to be involved in this project, get them around the table, and we quickly, just day one, we just look at what the screen is going to look like, for example. Right? Just have, like, for example, if it's an ATM, you get your deposits first, then you get your withdrawals, then you get this. Then someone might come in and say, listen, man, withdrawals are more important because most people, 70 to 80% of people go to an ATM to withdraw money. So let's put deposits on the top left, and then we can, I'm sorry, withdrawals on the top left, and then deposits, and then statement balances, etc. So once you got the basic layout done, that would be the first day. The second day, the same team of people would meet, and then they trash out, for example, the what's the fonts going to look like, what's the colors going to look like. The next day, they would go through the system to look at what are the different types of, for example, statements that and other kinds of printing that we need to do. What are the type of user journeys we need to do, and so on. So every day, it's the same type of people that are getting together to look at similar concepts, but they're going deeper and deeper into it. So hence it's iterative until we get to a stage where everyone's satisfied, and then we roll out the solution. Now, at first, it might sound very repetitive, but what's happening is in industry, what we found is the traditional methods could take sometimes 6 months to do a project or a year to do a project. And in Agile, with Agile methodologies, we can do the same project and roll out within 2 weeks to 4 weeks sometimes within 2 months. But it's much faster, and it's more accountable, and it's more achievable. Okay. And then some of the drivers of change that we got out there are, number one, digital disruption, right? This is huge. We spoke about this. AI and technology are coming, and there's nothing we can do to stop that storm. All we can do is ride the wave, right? It's a huge tsunami. So you either get a surfboard and you get on top of it, or that wave is going to smack you. Right. So you've got no option but to ride the wave. The other thing is customer demands, right? Customers are becoming more demanding. People want things available 24/7. Think about internet banking. Someone's doing internet banking at 3 a.m. They want it to be working. It doesn't matter whether it's 3 a.m. or whether it's a normal peak time, right? It's 24/7. Globalization, there's huge amounts of, the entire world has become a global village. So firstly, there's different, in different sectors of the world, there's different languages, different cultures, there's different ways of doing things, and we're starting to explore these things. A lot of people, for example, are shopping with Chinese websites such as Temu, Wish, and Alibaba, AliExpress, and so on. Some people have had horrible experiences and some have had fantastic experiences. So that's a part of the learning lesson that we've had. And we're also finding that China, for example, is sending out a lot of vehicles recently, right? So in the last 5 to 10 years, whereas before you would have your Germans, your Japanese, and the Koreans strong in the South African market, we're now starting to see the likes of Beijing, Haval, and so on coming into South Africa, and many, many more Chinese, not just vehicles, but appliances coming out. Okay. Now, what's important is for an organization and for an employee, this is super important for a manager, for a director, is to create and cultivate an agile mindset. So, what exactly is an agile mindset? It's about transparency, collaboration, adaptability, and customer focus. So it means that there should be transparency between the corporation and the customer, between management and employees, and so on. There should be strong collaboration between different departments. You don't want your marketing and your ops and your sales and finance and IT and HR teams fighting each other. You don't want silo mentality. You want people getting together, working together, breaking down the walls and the silos, and getting people to leave their egos at the door so that the projects and the work can get done faster. You also want adaptability in terms of, as I said earlier, because things change so rapidly in the modern era, right? Sometimes as we go along, we keep changing and we find new solutions, new plans, new ways of doing things. The last one is the most important one because agile is also about customer focus. It means that we shift away from saying, what can we as a company do? And we start looking at what does a customer really want? I'll give you a fantastic example of this. If you ever seen a remote control, a DSTV or a normal TV remote or a DVD remote, right? All right, let's be honest. Most of us know how to switch it on. We can use the volume up and down and the program up and down and the mute button, right? So that's it. Most of us just use about 5 to 7 buttons and that's it. But the engineers at the company that's creating that remote control, they put in like 50 functions and 70 buttons on there. And you're like, why do I need all this? What is this red button and this green button and the blue and pink and yellow buttons for, right? So the reality of the situation is agile is more about saying, no, let's not load this remote control with 300 different things, but let's rather give the customer what they really want, right? Give them what they really want, charge them half the price for the remote control, for example, and make it simple. Do customers even want a remote control? Or do they want voice activated control system? Do they want a, for example, augmented reality or a virtual reality type remote control? Do they want a direct interface, a thought interface, like what Elon Musk is coming out with, for example, with Neuralink, where you can use mind control technology to control your devices? I'm not making that up, it's real. It's here. Okay, so these are the questions we start to ask ourselves. Now, Agile is not about having all the answers. Agile is about asking the right questions. Okay, so beyond that, we've also got a huge behavior shift from control to trust. So instead of the management or the directors saying, listen, we are in total control, we know exactly what's going on, we know what the customer wants, we take a step back and we say, okay, let's ask the customer what they want. Let's start doing some research. Let the marketing team do some research. Let's find out what people really want and let's give that to them. Okay. So it's more about feedback instead of us coming with roadmaps and strategic plans for the next 5, 10, 20 years, which get disrupted anyways in 1 to 2 years. Let's ask customers what they want and let's find creative ways to innovate and give them what they want because that's how real value is created for the customer. The other thing is also looking at getting agility embedded into the roots, the nitty-gritty day-to-day transactions of the business. That's super important as well because there's no point in having an agile philosophy and then it doesn't get implemented at the company. Okay. I'm just going to look at a few of the core principles of agile. Number one is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So, for example, the sales team, instead of trying to just sign up new customers, right? Especially with key accounts and with big customers. Think of, for example, if Farmer Brown and Goldie are selling to KFC, Nando's, and Chicken Licken, those are huge accounts, right? So you don't want to be trying to squeeze out another 1 or 2% on them. You'd rather say, you know what, let's do a collaboration. Let's think of a relationship. Let's think about locking in this account for the next 10 years because it could be hundreds of millions, it could even be billions in that time frame. The other thing is responsivity to change, right? The faster we can respond to change, there's something called first mover advantage, FMA. And you will find that, for example, the first movers usually get the biggest chunk of the pie. Think of Apple, for example. When Apple is, when they come up with new products, for example, they always seem to be, very innovative, technologically savvy. Their products look very attractive, right? People are willing to spend 35, 40,000, 50,000 rands on an Apple iPhone, for example, because it looks so slick and because it's got this street cred and because it's aspirational. When in reality, it costs about $10 to $20 to make in China, right? Okay, let's look at also working solutions. This is super important. Working solutions over comprehensive documentation. So we find that a lot of companies would, in the past 20 to 30 years, there was a heavy focus on reports, management reports, executive reports, board reports, and so on. Now, you can't get away from certain reports, obviously. Annual financial statements, for example, that is legislative in nature. So you have to legally obviously do annual financial statements. But if you're communicating within the company, for example, what's our strategy going to be over the next 2 to 5 years, for example, we can have a one pager explaining everything, right? Because let's be honest, when someone sends you a 200-page document, people may skim and scan it, but no one's going to sit and read that document, right? So what happens is give a one pager or a two pager to people, let them get the highlights package or give them a 2-minute video. That's the first thing. And then that's a better way of communicating to people. The other thing we can look at is it's more about finding a working solution for the customer. Sometimes instead of spending 200 man hours on working on a report, we can take the same 200 man hours and think about how we could create a new product development, or a disruptor in the market, or take down the competition in some way, or get better, faster, cheaper, simpler in some way. Okay. The other thing we're looking at is individuals and interactions, relationships over processes and tools. Now, this is a big one because in the past 20 to 30 years, it used to be a lot of the business units were working in silos. You would get different teams and business units like marketing, sales, HR, IT, finance, operations, and so on, customer care, all maybe in their teams working against in some way, or maybe fighting, or sort of the right word is maybe just thrashing things out and trying to feel each other out better. But what's happened recently is the teams are starting to, as they're getting together on cross-functional projects, right, which are driven by Agile, you will find that when one project has an HR person, an IT person, and a ops person, and a customer care person, all these different departments, people from these teams, suddenly they start to realize that it breaks the barriers down. They don't see people as an IT person or a HR person. They start to see them as human beings, as Joe, Jack, Joe, Jeff, whatever it is, right? All the J's came out there. And then the other thing is a cultural shift, moving from hierarchy to self-organizing teams, meaning that more of a starfish model, more of a flatter model, something that's more agile, lighter, fluffy, easier to move, like almost like a bubble that can float rather than this huge, massive pyramid. Okay. The other thing that I'm looking at, and this is very important for us to understand, is Agile is here. It's here to stay. It's the latest in technology in business management. It's been around in IT and software development for a while, but it's taken off recently in the business management, the world of work at huge corporates, and it's really exploding right now. So Scrum, Kanban, Safe, and Less, those are some of the agile frameworks. Scrum is the most popular one, and you will see that you have things like, we'll talk a little bit more about it now, but you get your sprints, your Scrum Master, and so on. Kanban's got visual workflows, work in progress limits, and so on. And then there's agile scaling for bigger organizations called Safe and less. Okay. There are other technologies out there, XP, extreme programming, lean, and ASP, and so on. We won't go too much into all that, but I want to focus also now on the two major agile processes, which are, frameworks, which are, one is Scrum and the other one is Kanban. So let's do Scrum first because it's the most popular one. Firstly, what happens is the team gets together. We're talking about designing an ATM interface, for example, right? So the product backlog is, what exactly are we trying to achieve in this sprint? A sprint is about 1 to 4 weeks, 1 to 4 week cycle. And at the end of this 1 to 4 week cycle, we're going to have some kind of work output which we're going to achieve. In this case, we want to have a finished um, ATM design. Okay, so the product backlog will tell us all the things that we need to do that will get us from A to B. And then we start doing the planning and then the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog means that this is for the entire product. And now for this sprint cycle, which is 1 to 4 weeks, it's usually a 2 week cycle. And what do we want to achieve in this sprint? It's called a sprint because it's giving the impression to people that, listen, we're not going to sit around having coffee and discussing things for 3 hours. No, no, no. We're going to be fast. We're going to be quick. So the first thing is the Scrum Master is sort of like a project manager, very similar to a project manager. You have your team that reports into the Scrum Master. The product owner is usually now a person at director level. That's sort of the project sponsor, if you want to call it that, the person that's overseeing this whole thing. And then the Scrum Master and the team would report into that person, the product owner, let them know how things are going. So this could be like the director of ATMs, it could be an IT director, an ops director, etc. Now, how this works is you would do this spiral that we're talking about, this sprint. Firstly, every day there would be something called a daily stand-up meeting, right? Every single day from Monday to Friday. And the first thing in the morning, let's just say 8 a.m., people get together, they do a daily stand-up, no coffee, no sitting down, no notes. Just everyone stands around in a room and people say, listen, this is what I worked on yesterday. I had something outstanding, and today I'm going to work on XYZ. And at the end of the day, I'll deliver 3 items or 5 items, etc. So at first it sounds super easy, but what happens is if you do this on a Monday morning and you come to Tuesday and then suddenly people are like, hang on a second, you spoke about doing that yesterday. Why are you still working on that? And they could be like, okay, I hit a snag with this, or I tried to get to a customer, or I tried to finish that report, but the system was down, etc. So it creates a dialogue between the different team members. It helps the scrum master and the product owner to understand what the blockages, what the red flags are, and so on. And it also creates a strong level of accountability in the team because now people can't come in and faff around and say, listen, I'm working on something for 2 weeks. No, no, no. Every day you're being accountable because you're talking about what you did yesterday, what you're working on today. That's it. Okay. And at the end of the 2 to 4 week cycle, you will find that there's a working piece of work that's finished, some kind of work output, and that gets measured by the product owner and by the customer, whoever is using it internally or externally, and they sign it off. Now, in theory, this sounds super simple and super easy, but what happens is in the old days, it used to be that the IT team, for example, or a certain team, a project team that's working on something could take 6 months or a year or 2 years on a project. Now, with this daily stand-up meetings and this focus and this re-looking at things over and over, this intense focus creates so much of pressure on the team, but not bad pressure, pressure in a way that it creates enough pressure to motivate them to work without giving people a heart attack at the same time. So you've got to balance the pressure out as well. And it creates a lot of speed, it creates a lot of agility and a lot of responsiveness and collaboration between the different team members. Remember, the team members are comprised of different department unit members as well. So that's Scrum in a nutshell. Just to look at Kanban and what Kanban is about. Kanban is totally different from Scrum. How this works is you work with these little boards, right? And post-its. And what happens is people will be like, the backlog is what's outstanding, what's red. We were supposed to do this, we haven't gotten to it yet. What are we currently working on that's not due yet, but it's going to be due soon? What have we sent already? We've completed and we're waiting for management directors or customers to review and approve. And then what's been signed off and completed. Okay, so we look at these four boards, and even though it sounds quite simple initially, but when you're working on a large project, right, with multiple different complexities and variables, it starts to get more tricky, and you will find that these boards, as you start moving things from doing, suddenly it goes to review and done, and then people realize, oh, hang on a second, there's something we didn't consider, and comes back from the done table back to doing or back to the backlog, and that's how it moves and continues there. What's the good thing about this is it creates so much of focus on all the things that are supposed to be done and who's working on what. There's a strong amount of accountability. There's a strong amount of collaboration, and it makes the team feel good when they see all these things that are done because it's ticked off, and it's almost like a little to-do list. And as the team is ticking it off, they start to feel like, wow, we're getting control. Out of 200 items, we've got 120 done. We've made huge progress. Okay. So the big question you're asking yourself probably is, all right, I see there's a few questions. I'll deal with it just now. Let me just go through the presentation if you don't mind. I just want to make sure I finish within the hour. You're probably asking yourself, how does Agile really work? Because these are fantastic concepts. Does it really work in the real world? Yes, it does. It's been used in the US, in the UK, in Europe, throughout the world, even in India, China, in parts of Russia. It's being used and it's working fantastically well. Firstly, let's look at agile human resources. So these sprint recruitment cycles, that sometimes in human resources, it might take 6 months or 4 months or 3 months to hire a candidate at a management or at a junior level. It could even take a year or two to hire the right executive. Okay. But what's happening with agile human resources is we get the entire team together, they focus, they have a sprint cycle. They say, okay, guys, we're giving ourselves 4 weeks maximum to get the new person in. Could be a new marketing director or sales director, whatever it is. You got the whole team of people around the table. They brainstorm quickly what are the most important things that we need from this. They all shortlist the candidates together. They can do a first batch of, let's just say, MS Teams panel interview. And because everyone's so focused on this and people know that they've committed to a 4 week deadline, so instead of declining meetings and delaying the process, there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of accountability on it. Okay, so suddenly what would take 6 months to do, you would find that the new person is being hired in 4 weeks, 3 weeks, sometimes 2 weeks. So that's fantastic. The other thing is employee journeys and career paths, succession planning. So in the old days, there wasn't much succession planning done. There would be, one person might sit in a position for 20 years or 30 years or 40 years and then retire from there or eventually resign from there and so on. What now happens is because the average person is lasting 3 to 5 years in a position, and then they're either getting promoted or they're moving to another department or they're leaving the company for some greener pastures. So what happens is you will find that there's a lot of gaps that are created in upward mobility. So what Agile does is Agile is saying, listen, let's create a career path for someone. Maybe someone starts in the call center, right? And they want to work their way to becoming a marketing manager, for example, or they want to work their way to becoming a sales consultant, or they want to work their way to becoming a IT software developer. So the first thing that the team would do is they'll say, okay, fine. Do you have aptitude for this? Are you willing to, let's just say, study a short course on this? And once the employee gets into it and they find, hey, you know what? Before I even start all this, let's do something agile. Let them shadow a person in that department, in the job they want to do, shadow them for a week. So they shadow the person for a week and then they realize, hey, you know what? This job here, it's not exactly for me. I wanted to be a chef, but I don't like standing on my feet the whole day and it's just too hot in the kitchen. So let me get out of that and get back to what I was doing, for example, right? Or it might be something fantastic, like the person loves this. They're like, okay, this is awesome. This is like Master Chef. I want to do this. I want to be the next Gordon Ramsay, Jamie Oliver. Life's good. So what that does is instead of someone studying for a year or two, they get this they shadow someone in the company for a week or two. They see if they're keen or interested or not, and then they do a short course. They get something called getting their toes wet, toe dipping, right? And then they start working slowly but surely, maybe on a Saturday or after hours. And eventually, by showing that motivation, that drive, and that willingness and eagerness, they eventually get moved into that department. Okay. Another big one is flexible working hours, right? So remember that, for example, instead of working 8 to 4:30, for example, or 9 to 5, a lot of companies now, because of traffic and things like that, companies are saying, okay, fine. If you want to work, let's just say from 6 in the morning till say 3 in the afternoon or 2:30, that's also fine. Or you want to work from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., that's also fine. Okay. These are different things that companies are considering because in certain parts of the country, there's huge amounts of traffic. If you take Gauteng, for example, on the M1, there's massive, massive traffic on that freeway. So people sometimes spend 2.5 hours in the morning and 2.5 hours in the evening, depending if there's, accidents and trucks broken down. That's 4 to 5 hours a day in traffic people are spending, right? Maybe from Joburg to Pretoria and so on. And that's a huge amount of time to be sitting in traffic. It's firstly, it's bad for your health. Secondly, it's bad for your bank balance, and the fuel is being wasted, and it's time you could be spending fruitfully with your family and friends. So companies like Google, for example, what's Google doing? They're looking at having relaxed workspaces. So let's look at some of the Google pictures here. Right? These little pods that Google has here, as you can see, this could be a software developer, it could be a marketing person, it could be a salesperson. They get in there, they have this, they can put their feet up and sit in their socks and lounge around, and they're still working. They're working, they can even close these pods, as you can see here, and get semi-privacy. Obviously, there's some glass in here as well. And let's take a look at the some of the meeting rooms. This is like what a Google boardroom would look like, for example, almost like someone's lounge. So it creates an atmosphere of belonging, of collaboration, of relaxation. Look at this pod here. This is fantastic. You sit in this chair. This looks almost like a executive chair, and it's somewhere between an executive chair meets a dentist chair, right? Something like that. And you can sit in there, you lounge in there and relax. You can even close the pod for semi-privacy, and then you can work on your laptop, or you can perhaps brainstorm for a little while a new design or new pattern, etc., a new product idea. And look at how Google is beating the trends of lifts and elevators. They got slides, right? So you can go from one floor to another on the slide if you want to take the expressway. And if you're feeling like it's a lazy Friday, you can get on the hammock and chill out on your laptop. So these are some of the ideas that Google has, and it's working quite well. And what they're finding is people are actually more productive. It sounds counterintuitive, right? Why would someone on a hammock or in this pod be more productive? It's simply because, right, when you have a mature bunch of people and they're behaving like adults, they're being treated like adults, and what happens is they want the rewards to stay. So they know they're more motivated to work harder and smarter and get better results because they want these benefits, these perks to stay. Okay. Now let's look at agile finance. So typically finance departments, when they're creating budgets and forecasts and stuff, they would just be very dictatorial. They would be like, this is how much we have, this is how much each department is getting. Now agile is saying, listen, let's work with different departments, let's find out what activities they are doing for the year, and let's find out if they have enough free cash flow for those activities. Maybe we need to take from one department and put into another, or maybe instead of having an even flat figure during the year over 12 months. We need to push in more budget during a certain time when a new product is going live or when some activity is happening. Also, it's about focusing budget on value streams. So, what customer value is coming out of certain things, certain activities, certain projects, rather than just the project itself, because the project sounds cool or because the project is backed by a certain sponsor or because it's from a certain department. Let's not lose focus on those things and rather look at the customer value we're creating. And then we're also looking at short, punchy financial dashboards on live screens, right? So things like, how much free cash flow do we have? How much of bad debt do we have? Is it red? Is it green? Is it going up? Is it coming down? Are we on target, behind target? So in a nutshell, right? Anyone in any part of the company can quickly go online onto maybe the intranet or some kind of live stream platform and see how the company is doing. That will reassure individuals. And then if someone's about to pull the trigger and just do a huge amount of spending, they might be like, whoa, let's hold on, let's wait for another week or two because it seems like our free cash flow is quite low right now. Okay, that's where the collaboration part comes in. Okay, now let's look at agile sales and customer service. So, firstly, we're looking at customer-centric sales. Focus more on what the experience is from start to finish for the customer. You want to leave the customer with such an amazing smile on their face that their next purchase is not even a thought. They know that they're stuck with you. Think of BMW, for example, and Mercedes. Think of Audi. Think of Apple and their smartphones and their technology. Right. Let's create customer journeys. So, for example, a customer buys a starter pack, the VW Polo at under 400K. That's their first car, for example, when they start working. And then what happens is VW sort of gets entrenched into the customer and shows them, starts actively sending them emails, sending them, free tickets to some of their racing events, giving them some memorabilia, some, maybe a small keychain or caps and, t-shirts, trinkets. People love these freebie gadgets, right? But especially things like that would sort of lock in a customer more into the brand, and there'll be more brand loyalty. And then you keep selling the customer upstream, right? You sell them on and on and on until the customer's entrepreneur or a director, and you're selling them a 1.8 million rand Touareg, for example. So you see how you've locked the customer in on this huge journey, and you've taken them from the base model to the flagship model, and now they're buying a 1.8 million rand car. That's like a pretty good townhouse in a decent area, actually, that you're driving around in there. 1.8 million. Okay, and then the other thing is looking at simplicity, right? So one click, if a customer wants to complain about any issue, right? One click, they can go online or they can go to an app or talk to a chatbot. Within 5 minutes, they're getting proper feedback. The chatbot is saying, okay, we've escalated your query, it's gone to this department, and we'll have more feedback for you. And it makes the customer feel heard. Even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, the customer has reported, maybe they've lost their ATM card, for example, right? Things have happened already. It's been reported. The card's been frozen. Customer feels much safer. And by the time the banks open in the morning, we know that the customer can go in and sort things out, but they've already got this good feeling of, okay, I'm in control. Another big one is quick start guides and how-to guides, right? And a lot of the time when you're trying to do something difficult, like installing new furniture, which is in piece by piece form, or some appliance that comes with tons of screws and bolts and nuts, and you're looking at this thing and you're like, look at the diagram. The diagram looks like some engineering master's degree kind of thing, and you're like, okay, I don't even know where to start with this. So let's keep it simple. Agile is about simplicity. It's about, instead of thinking from the engineering mindset and the people that are designing the entire product, let's look at it from the customer's point of view. Make it simple. Make it really simple. Make it, um, you know, very intuitive. And this could be a one-page quick start guide, or it could be like a 2-minute video. The customer watches a 2-minute video and they can install the furniture, right? IKEA, for example, is fantastic at this. IKEA makes furniture, which is so intuitive. As you snap things, they snap into place and you move things around. There's very few bolts, nuts, and screws, and everything. You can actually put the entire piece together within like a minute, sometimes maybe 2 minutes, and it's very, very simple to use. Okay, getting towards the tail end of the lecture, and I'll take your questions shortly. Just last few things I want to talk about. We're also looking at how do we implement agile in organizations. You need leadership buy-in. This is super important. If the CEO and the C-suite or the executive team, right, the marketing director, sales director, and so on, if they don't buy into agile, if they're not committed to agile, and if they're not speaking good things about agile, it's not going to happen. So the cultural alignment has to be there. Leadership buy-in, super important. Then we create the cross-functional teams, right, with the different departments for different mini projects and different mini sprints. We don't call them projects, but more sprints, because sprints creates the idea of we are running towards a workable solution, rather than having a project which could take 2 to 3 years. Using the right agile framework, continuously feeding back, right? And most importantly, scaling across the enterprise with the right agile technology. Okay. Speaking of agile tools and technologies, right? Some of these, I'm sure you might have heard of Jira, Trello, and Asana. These are project management software that are in the agile space, right? So you'll see that you can put in who's doing what, and when they're doing it, you'll have a calendar or a, like maybe weekly or monthly calendar, and you can see if there's clashes. Maybe you've allocated 20 hours worth of work to one person in a day, which is not going to work, or maybe someone sitting idle, or maybe you need one activity to finish before the next activity can start, dependencies and so on. You can see all that visually with things like Trello and Asana. Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Slack, and so on. These are collaboration tools, which I'm sure we're using one tonight, so you should understand that quite well. The next one is Confluence, Miro. These are about knowledge sharing and data visualization, right? And Power BI, business intelligence tool, and Tableau. Also data-driven decision making and lots of visualizations, pie charts, bar graphs, and cycles, seasons, patterns being picked up, and so on. This is really powerful because it gives executives and managers a snapshot. It gives anyone a snapshot to see how we're tracking, right? And within a few seconds of looking at this visually, you can just tell, are we on target or not? Are we in trouble or not? This is fantastic. The reverse side is reading a 50-page report to get this information, which is at your fingertips right now. Okay, and then some of the drivers of success, how do we measure this, right? So we have KPIs, like we notice that there's faster delivery, right? Agile is much faster and you get quicker feedback from your team, from your managers, from your directors, from your customers. People across the board are giving much faster feedback. Right, customer KPIs, net promoter score, and customer satisfaction improvements, right? Huge, massive improvements. Customers much happier because they're being heard and they are being, valued, and what they're asking for is being delivered. And we also have employees start to get happy. I think, employees get much happier. Think of the Google environment we looked at just now, right? Would you, as an employee, be happier working in an environment where you can be treated like, more responsibly and work autonomously, right? Like the Google environment with those pods and those slides and hammocks? Or would you be happier just sitting behind a desk in a cubicle the whole day? You've got to ask yourself that question. So higher engagement, higher retention, and better results from employees. Some of the common roadblocks we have, obviously, we have roadblocks in terms of resistance to change, right? Especially from employees who have been maybe at the tail end of their career and maybe they've been working for 30 to 40 years. And then what is this new agile technology? So we got to get the buy-in of people who've been used to doing things a certain way and now they have to change. Also, misaligned KPIs, looking at tool or information overload we spoke about. Lack of agile expertise. A lot of people don't understand agile. So this is where some of the solutions might be, like getting in agile coaches to come in and coach the entire team and the entire company on how to use agile. Getting leadership support from the executives and managers. They have to support agile for it to work. Internal champions, agile champions. Financial backing, because this is very important, because when we want to do the sprint cycles, we're creating the cross-functional teams, we need the finance department to release the funds to let those projects and those sprints happen and create the little process workflows and the work outputs that we need. So the most important thing is to start small with agile, pilot it in the company, let it work, prove the concept, and then scale it out to the rest of the company. Some positive case studies of how agile has worked. You got ING Bank, for example, International Bank. Amazon, I'm sure you know of, right? The company worth trillions of US dollars. Multiply that by 18 to 20 for the rand, right? So trillions of US dollars, Amazon, and they're using agile very successfully, right? For customer obsession, continuous experimentation. And Tesla, I'm sure you've heard of, one of the companies owned by Elon Musk. They're using it for new product development and supply chain flexibility, right? Huge, massive. Okay, so in a nutshell, you can see there's some really, really big companies out there, trillion-dollar companies and billion-dollar companies that are using Agile, and it's working. It's getting the results. And then In the future, what's coming up with Agile? We've got some of the trends are AI and automation. We looked at the McDonald's e-boards. We've got remote and hybrid Agile teams. We've got Agile governance for compliance. And then Agile moving into different sectors, legal, HR, finance, strategy, operations, sales, etc. Okay. And finally, the most important I want you to take away from here is that Agile is a mindset shift towards adaptability, innovation, and customer focus. Okay. All right, so I'll just take a few questions now. Let's just see. All right, let's have a look here. Hmm. Okay, I think Masayuri was managing the chat. All right. Thank you to Masayuri for helping and assisting with that. Someone asked, what's the difference between business management and business administration? That's a nice question. Probably not the focus of our discussion this evening, but thank you for that, Nosisa. Okay, let's just have a look here. Okay, someone said that they came in late. So what you can do is you can watch the recording of this session and you can catch up with us. Thank you for that. Okay, let's see. Business management. Okay, thank you to let's just see. I think Masayuri tried to help us here. Thank you for answering the difference between business management, focusing on strategic decision making, and business admin is more day-to-day operations. That's correct. And let's have a look here. Yes, Agile is flexible, iterative, and it's smarter and faster and better way of doing things. Mhm. Okay. Thank you, Wesley, for that comment. We appreciate your sense of humor. Okay, let's have a look. Yes, you will get the video recording. I think Region Business School will make it available. It is being recorded, so that's fine. You can see the recording button is on here. And then, yeah, someone said that the webinar will be available on YouTube. Thank you for that. Okay, any more questions, any more concerns before I wrap it up? Okay. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining this evening. All the best and God bless to you. My name is Ravin Baburam, and this has been an Agile Business Masterclass. I hope you learned something today, and I hope that I stimulated your mind, asked some questions that got those, got your thinking caps on. And thank you for joining me on this evening. And all the best, and have a good night further. And God bless. Thank you so much to those who thanked and who appreciated the masterclass. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you, everyone. Good night and God bless.